There is a moment when life goes quiet, a moment when you're not distracted, a moment when you realize something isn't wrong, but something isn't right either. Most people don't fail at life. They stall, they keep moving, but not forward. They wake up, do what's expected, and go to sleep feeling slightly disconnected from themselves. Not broken, just unfinished. And that quiet discomfort follows them everywhere. You've probably tried to change. You've probably promised yourself this time would be different, and for a short while it was. You set new goals, you built new habits. You felt motivated, focused, hopeful. But slowly, without any dramatic moment, you drifted back into familiar patterns, the same reactions, the same thinking, the same version of yourself you thought you had outgrown. That's when the doubt started to settle in. Not loudly, but deeply. Maybe this is just who I am. Maybe real change isn't for me. That belief is the real trap. Real transformation doesn't fail because you're weak. It fails because you're trying to change your life without changing the inner structure that runs it. You can change your job, your routine, even your environment. But if your identity stays the same, your behavior will always return to what feels safe and familiar. Most people were never taught how to change from the inside out. They were taught how to cope, how to push through, how to perform. But performance isn't transformation. Effort isn't identity. And motivation doesn't last when your inner standards remain unchanged. The invisible story you tell yourself about who you are will always overpower the goals you set. This audiobook is not about hype. It's not about becoming someone new overnight. It's about rebuilding what's underneath everything else. If you're tired of starting over, tired of feeling stuck in the same mental loops, tired of pretending you're fine when you know you're not growing, then this is for you. Not because you're broken, but because something inside you is asking for alignment. Real change begins when the question shifts from "what should I do?" to "who am I becoming?" When your identity changes, discipline stops feeling like punishment. Consistency stops feeling forced. Confidence stops feeling fake. You don't need to fight yourself anymore because your actions finally match your inner standards. Over the next hour, you won't be told to hustle harder or fix yourself. You'll be guided to slow down, look inward, and rebuild from the core. You'll learn how to release old mental scripts that quietly sabotage you, how to gain calm control over your emotions, and how to become someone who doesn't rely on motivation, because their identity does the work for them. This isn't about perfection. It's about honesty and the courage to evolve. And if while listening, someone comes to mind, a friend who feels lost, overwhelmed, or quietly stuck, share this video with them. Sometimes the most powerful way to help someone improve their life is simply reminding them that real transformation is still possible. Chapter 1. Identity comes before action. Most people believe change begins with action. They think if they just do more, try harder, or stay consistent long enough, their life will eventually catch up. So they chase habits, routines, and systems, hoping behavior alone will reshape who they are. But action without identity is fragile. It works only when conditions are perfect, when motivation is high, and when nothing disrupts the plan. The moment pressure appears, old patterns return. Every action you take is downstream from how you see yourself. You don't wake up each morning and logically decide who you are going to be. You act from an internal definition that already exists. That definition quietly answers questions like, what do I tolerate? What do I avoid? What do I believe I deserve? And most of the time, that definition was formed years ago, not by conscious choice, but by repetition. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with discipline, then every missed day reinforces that belief. If you see yourself as someone who always starts strong but never finishes, then quitting feels familiar, almost comfortable. This is why change feels exhausting for so many people. They're trying to behave like a new person while still identifying as the old one. And identity always wins that conflict. Identity is not who you want to be. It's who you believe you are when no one is watching. It's revealed in small moments, not big promises. It shows up in how quickly you give up, how you speak to yourself after a mistake, and what you do when effort feels inconvenient. Long before action becomes habit, identity becomes permission. This is why willpower eventually fails. Willpower asks you to fight yourself every day. Identity removes the fight entirely. When something aligns with who you believe you are, it no longer feels like effort. You don't need motivation to brush your teeth or lock your door, because those actions fit your identity. They're automatic. They feel obvious. The same principle applies to discipline, consistency, and growth. Most people try to change by asking the wrong question. They ask, "What should I do differently?" But lasting change begins with a deeper question. Who must I become so that these actions feel natural? The mistake isn't wanting better habits. The mistake is trying to stack habits on top of an identity that doesn't support them. If your self-image is built around avoidance, comfort, or self-doubt, no productivity system will save you. You'll sabotage it quietly. You'll skip days. You'll lower standards. You'll explain it away, not because you're lazy, but because your identity is protecting what feels familiar. Identity is shaped through evidence. Every small action you repeat casts a vote for the type of person you believe yourself to be. Missed commitments vote for inconsistency. Kept promises vote for self-respect. Over time, these votes accumulate until they form a solid internal story. And once that story feels true, you defend it, even if it's hurting you. This is why transformation feels uncomfortable at first. You're not just changing behavior, you're challenging a self-concept, and the mind resists that deeply. It prefers predictability over growth. It would rather keep you stuck than uncertain. This resistance often disguises itself as logic, fatigue, or being realistic. But underneath, it's fear of losing a familiar identity. Letting go of an old identity can feel like losing part of yourself. Even if that identity is limiting, it's known. It explains your past. It gives you a story to tell. But real growth requires a quiet decision to stop protecting the version of yourself that no longer fits the life you want to live. You don't need to become someone else overnight. Identity doesn't change through declarations. It changes through alignment, through repeated proof, through showing yourself day after day that you act differently now. The key is not intensity, the key is consistency with intention. Instead of asking yourself to do everything better, ask yourself to do one thing differently. One small action that represents the person you're becoming. Not the person you wish you were, but the person you are choosing to build. When that action feels uncomfortable, that's a sign you're touching identity, not just habit. Discipline becomes easier when it's no longer framed as self-control. It becomes an expression of self-respect. You don't show up because you're forcing yourself. You show up because that's what someone like you does now. The language matters. The framing matters. Your mind listens closely to how you define yourself. This is also why external validation can't sustain change. Compliments fade. Praise wears off. Accountability partners disappear. When growth depends on someone else watching, it collapses the moment they stop. Identity-based change survives in silence. It's built in private, reinforced when no one applauds. The strongest shifts happen quietly. They happen when you keep a promise no one knows about, when you stop explaining yourself, when you act in alignment even though the results haven't shown up yet. Identity comes before confidence, before success, before visible transformation. You don't become confident because you succeed. You succeed because you start acting like someone who respects themselves before the outcome is guaranteed. This chapter is not asking you to label yourself as powerful or disciplined. It's asking you to become honest about who you've been acting like, and more importantly, who you're no longer willing to be. Identity is not fixed, but it is earned. It responds to proof, not hope. From this point forward, the work is simple, but not easy. Stop trying to feel ready. Stop waiting for clarity. Begin acting as the person you are becoming, especially in small, uncomfortable moments. Because the life you want doesn't require a new environment first. It requires a new internal standard. Change the way you define yourself, and action will follow. Chapter 2. The hidden scripts running your life. Long before you make a decision has already been made for you. Not consciously, not deliberately, but internally, quietly, automatically. Most of what you do each day is not the result of choice, but the result of scripts that have been running in the background of your mind for years. These scripts are the beliefs you rarely question. They shape how you interpret effort, failure, discomfort, and success. They decide what feels possible and what feels unrealistic. They influence what you attempt and what you abandon before you even begin. And because they operate beneath awareness, they feel like the truth. A hidden script might sound like, "I'm just not a disciplined person," or "people like me don't get ahead," or "if I slow down, everything will fall apart." You don't usually hear these thoughts clearly. You feel them. They show up as hesitation, resistance, overthinking, or exhaustion. They show up as the urge to quit early, to avoid commitment, or to stay comfortable even when comfort is costing you your growth. Most of these scripts were never consciously chosen. They were absorbed, repeated, reinforced through experience. A few early failures, a critical voice growing up, a moment when trying hard didn't work. Over time, your mind connected the dots and wrote a story that helped you survive. That story may have protected you once, but now it may be limiting you. The mind's primary goal is not growth. It is safety, and safety often means familiarity. This is why your brain will pull you back toward old patterns, even when you consciously want something better. Change threatens the script, and anything that threatens the script feels dangerous to the nervous system. This is why self-sabotage is so common. Not because people secretly want to fail, but because success would require them to become someone unfamiliar, someone without the old excuses, someone without the old identity, and that can feel more uncomfortable than staying stuck. Hidden scripts influence how you interpret reality. Two people can face the same challenge and walk away with completely different meanings. One sees proof that they are capable. The other sees confirmation that they are not enough. The event is neutral. The script supplies the meaning. Once a script feels true, the mind begins to look for evidence to support it. You notice what confirms it and ignore what contradicts it. This is how limiting beliefs become self-reinforcing. You don't just live inside the script, you defend it. This is why positive thinking rarely works on its own. You can repeat affirmations all day, but if your internal script disagrees, your nervous system will reject them. Words without evidence feel false. The mind doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you consistently experience. Awareness is the first break in the loop. You cannot change a script you cannot see. The moment you begin to notice the automatic thoughts that arise under pressure, you start to create distance. That distance is power. It allows you to observe rather than obey. Pay attention to what your mind says when things get hard, when motivation drops, when discomfort appears, when effort is required without immediate reward. That voice is not objective truth. It is conditioning. One of the most powerful realizations you can have is this: thoughts are habits. Just like behaviors, they form through repetition, and just like behaviors, they can be changed, not by force, but by interruption and replacement. You don't need to argue with every negative thought. You need to stop treating it as a command. When a thought says, "This isn't worth it," you don't have to fight it. You only have to recognize it as a script speaking. Recognition alone weakens its grip. As you build awareness, something important happens. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the one noticing them. That separation creates choice. And choice is the foundation of transformation. Replacing a script does not mean pretending the old one never existed. It means gathering new evidence. Small, consistent proof that contradicts the old story. Every time you follow through when it would be easier not to, you create that proof. Every time you stay calm instead of reacting, you rewrite the narrative. Every time you choose long-term alignment over short-term relief, the script loosens. This process feels subtle at first. There is no dramatic breakthrough, no instant confidence, but beneath the surface, your internal framework begins to shift. The mind starts updating its expectations. What once felt impossible begins to feel unfamiliar, then uncomfortable, and eventually normal. This is why patience is essential. You are not just changing outcomes, you are changing interpretation. You are teaching your nervous system that a new way of being is safe, and safety is what allows change to stick. Be careful what you repeatedly tell yourself during difficult moments. Those words become structured. They become default responses. Over time, they become identities. The goal is not to silence your inner voice, but to retrain it. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" ask, "What script is being activated right now?" That question creates space, and in that space, you regain control. Transformation accelerates when you stop trying to overpower your mind and start understanding it. Your thoughts are not enemies. They are outdated instructions. Once you see them clearly, you can choose whether to follow them or let them go. Hidden scripts run your life only as long as they remain hidden. Bring them into awareness, and they lose their authority. In the next chapter, you'll learn how emotional reactions are often the physical expression of these scripts, and how gaining control over your emotions becomes one of the most practical forms of power you can develop. Chapter 3. Emotional control is the foundation of power. Most people believe power comes from confidence, intelligence, or status. But real power begins somewhere much quieter. It begins with emotional control, not the suppression of emotion, not pretending you don't feel anything, but the ability to experience emotion without being ruled by it. Without this skill, every plan you make is fragile, because emotions will always override logic in moments of pressure. When emotions run unchecked, they dictate behavior. Anger pushes you to react. Fear pushes you to avoid it. Excitement pushes you to overcommit. Frustration pushes you to quit. None of these emotions are wrong on their own. The problem appears when they become decision makers instead of signals. Emotional reactions feel urgent. They create the illusion that something must be done immediately. A message needs to be answered now. A feeling needs to be escaped now. A problem needs to be fixed now. That sense of urgency is what collapses discipline and clarity. The faster you react, the less choice you have. This is why people regret decisions made in emotional states. Not because they are careless, but because emotion narrows perception. It shortens time horizons. It shifts focus from long-term alignment to short-term relief. In those moments, the goal is not progress. The goal is comfort. Powerful people are not less emotional. They are less reactive. They feel the same internal signals, but they don't let those signals hijack their behavior. They create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, they choose deliberately. Most emotional reactions are learned patterns. They were formed through repetition, just like habits. A raised voice triggers defensiveness. Criticism triggers shutdown. Uncertainty triggers anxiety. These reactions once served a purpose. They helped you cope, protect yourself, or feel in control. But over time, they become automatic, and automation removes choice. The nervous system is always scanning for threat. When it perceives one, it activates a response before your rational mind can engage. This is not a character flaw. It's biology, but biology does not have to be destiny. Awareness allows regulation. Regulation allows control. Emotional control does not mean ignoring what you feel. It means noticing it without immediately acting on it. The moment you can say, "I'm feeling this," instead of "I must act because of this," you regain power. That simple shift changes everything. Most people confuse emotional expression with emotional honesty. They believe that reacting immediately is authentic. But authenticity without self-control is chaos. True honesty includes responsibility. It includes the ability to pause and decide how you want to show up, not just how you feel in the moment. This is especially important during moments of discomfort. Discomfort is where growth lives, but it is also where emotional reactions are strongest. The urge to escape, distract, or quit intensifies. If you allow emotion to dictate your response, discomfort will always push you back to familiar ground. Calm is not a weakness, it is strength under control. It is the ability to stay grounded when others become reactive. It is the capacity to hold your position without needing to dominate, explain, or defend. Calm creates authority because it signals self-trust. When you remain calm, you see more clearly. You hear what others miss. You recognize patterns instead of getting lost in noise. Calm gives you access to your full cognitive ability. Reactivity shuts that access down. This is why emotional mastery is foundational. You can have the best goals, the best systems, and the strongest intentions, but if your emotions run your behavior, everything collapses under pressure. Emotional control stabilizes identity. It protects consistency. It preserves momentum. One of the most powerful practices you can develop is the pause. Not a long pause, just a moment, a breath, a step back. That pause interrupts the automatic loop. It tells your nervous system that you are not in immediate danger, that you have time to choose. At first, the pause feels uncomfortable. Your mind will argue that you're wasting time, that you're being passive, that you're avoiding action. But in reality, you're preventing impulsive action. You're training yourself to respond instead of react. Over time, something shifts. The emotional waves don't disappear, but they lose their grip. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once triggered immediate reaction becomes information. You begin to trust yourself more because you know you won't abandon your values under pressure. Emotional control also changes how others respond to you. People feel safer around those who are regulated. Conversations become clearer. Conflict de-escalates. Authority emerges naturally. You don't need to assert control when you embody it. This doesn't mean you'll never feel overwhelmed again. It means that when you do, you won't make permanent decisions from temporary states. You won't sabotage long-term goals to satisfy short-term emotion. You won't confuse intensity with importance. The real test of emotional mastery is consistency. Can you remain grounded when tired, when disappointed, when things don't go your way? These are the moments that shape character, not when life is easy, but when it challenges you quietly. Emotional control is built through repetition in these moments, not through theory. Start small. Notice the first physical signs of emotional activation: tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, mental urgency. These are signals, not commands. When you notice them early, regulation becomes easier. Then practice choosing your response, not the perfect response, just a better one. One that aligns with the person you are becoming. Over time, those small choices accumulate. The nervous system learns that calm is safe, that restraint is strength, As emotional control grows, something unexpected happens. Confidence increases. Not the loud kind, but the grounded kind. The kind that doesn't need validation. You trust yourself because you've proven that you won't betray your own standards when it matters. This is power. Not control over others, but control over yourself. And self-control is the only form of power that can't be taken away. In the next chapter, you'll learn how this emotional stability becomes the foundation for discipline. Not discipline as punishment, but discipline as an expression of identity and self-respect. Chapter 4. Discipline is not punishment, it's identity. Most people associate discipline with force, with restriction, with suffering, with doing things they don't want to do because they feel they have to. That's why discipline feels heavy to so many people. It's framed as punishment for not being good enough yet, instead of as an expression of who they are choosing to become. When discipline is built on force, it never lasts. You can push yourself for a while. You can rely on guilt, pressure, or fear to stay on track. But eventually, resistance builds. Fatigue sets in. In the moment life applies pressure, discipline collapses because it was never rooted in identity. It was rooted in self-conflict. True discipline does not come from self-control alone. It comes from self-respect. It comes from an internal standard that says, "This is how I live now." When discipline is tied to identity, it stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like something you are. Think about the areas of your life where discipline feels natural. You don't negotiate whether you show up late to everything or brush your teeth once a week. You don't need motivation to meet certain standards because they are already part of your self-image. You simply don't see yourself as the kind of person who doesn't do those things. That's the difference identity makes. It removes negotiation. When discipline requires constant debate, it drains energy. When it's aligned with identity, it becomes automatic. The mind stops asking, "Should I?" and starts saying, "Of course." Most people fail to build discipline because they aim too high, too fast, without adjusting their internal standards. They try to become highly disciplined overnight while still seeing themselves as inconsistent. Every missed action then becomes proof that the old identity is still true. And the cycle repeats. Discipline isn't built by dramatic effort. It's built by keeping small promises consistently. Every time you do what you said you would do, especially when it would be easier not to, you reinforce a new identity. You teach your mind that you are reliable, that you follow through, that you can be trusted. This is why small actions matter so much. They don't look impressive, they don't produce immediate results, but they shape how you see yourself, and how you see yourself determines everything else. When discipline is identity-based, failure is interpreted differently. A missed day doesn't become a reason to quit. It becomes feedback, a signal to adjust, not to abandon. The goal is no longer perfection. The goal is alignment. Most people confuse discipline with intensity. They believe being disciplined means pushing hard, doing more, and never slowing down. But intensity is unstable. Identity is durable. The most disciplined people are not the most extreme. They are the most consistent. They understand something crucial. Discipline is not about forcing behavior. It's about removing friction. It's about designing your life in a way that supports the person you are becoming. When your environment, routines, and standards align with your identity, discipline requires less effort. This is also why discipline collapses under emotional pressure when it's not identity-based. When stress rises, people revert to their default self-image. If that image is built around avoidance, comfort, or inconsistency, discipline disappears. But when discipline is part of who you are, pressure strengthens it instead of breaking it. Self-respect grows through discipline, not because discipline makes you productive, but because it builds trust with yourself. Every time you follow through, You send a message. I take myself seriously. That message compounds. Over time, it changes how you speak to yourself, how you carry yourself, and how you tolerate excuses. Discipline also simplifies decision-making. When standards are clear, choices become easier. You don't waste energy debating every action. You act in alignment because misalignment feels uncomfortable. That internal discomfort is not guilt. It's integrity asserting itself. This is where many people get it wrong. They wait to feel motivated before acting disciplined. But motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Identity does not. If you wait to feel like it, you hand control over to your emotional state. Discipline begins when action no longer depends on mood. The shift is subtle but powerful. You stop asking, "Do I feel like doing this today?" and start asking, "Is this who I am now?" That question reframes everything. It turns discipline from an external demand into an internal choice. You are no longer forcing yourself to act against who you are. You're acting in alignment with who you are becoming. There will be days when discipline feels heavy, not because it's punishment, but because growth is uncomfortable. Discomfort does not mean something is wrong. It means you are stretching beyond old limits. The key is not to interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. Discipline teaches you to tolerate discomfort without escaping it. That tolerance builds emotional stability. Emotional stability supports consistency, and consistency reinforces identity. This is how discipline becomes self-sustaining. It's important to understand that discipline is not about denying yourself pleasure. It's about choosing long-term alignment over short-term relief. It's about saying no to what weakens you so you can say yes to what strengthens you. People who lack discipline often believe they are missing willpower. In reality, they are missing clarity about who they are becoming. Once that clarity exists, discipline stops being a struggle. It becomes a natural extension of self-respect. Discipline also protects your future self. Every disciplined action today reduces the burden tomorrow. It prevents chaos, it creates momentum, and it builds a life that feels stable instead of reactive. You don't need to become perfectly disciplined. You need to become consistently aligned. Discipline grows through repetition, not pressure. Through identity, not force. As you move forward, don't aim to do everything right. Aim to become someone who keeps their word to themselves. Start small, stay consistent. Let discipline shape your identity and let identity carry you when motivation fades. In the next chapter, you'll learn how to rebuild your thinking patterns so that discipline, emotional control, and identity work together instead of against each other. Chapter 5. Rebuilding your thinking patterns. Your life is shaped less by what happens to you and more by how you interpret what happens. Two people can experience the same setback, the same criticism, the same pressure, and walk away with completely different outcomes. One grows stronger, the other feels defeated. The difference is not intelligence or luck. It's the thinking pattern they use to process reality. Thinking patterns are the mental habits you rely on without noticing. They determine whether you see a challenge as information or as proof that something is wrong with you. They influence whether discomfort feels temporary or permanent. Over time, these patterns become the lens through which you view everything, and that lens quietly determines your direction. Most people assume their thoughts are objective. They believe what they think is simply the truth. But thoughts are interpretations, not facts. They are shaped by past experiences, emotional conditioning, and repeated internal dialogue. When these interpretations go unexamined, they begin to limit what feels possible. A common pattern is catastrophizing. One mistake becomes evidence of failure. One slow day becomes a sign of decline. One uncomfortable emotion becomes a reason to stop. This pattern doesn't appear dramatic. It appears logical. but it erodes resilience and shrinks your capacity to stay consistent. Another common pattern is personalization. You interpret neutral events as reflections of your worth. A lack of response feels like rejection. Feedback feels like judgment. Silence feels like disapproval. When everything feels personal, emotional energy is constantly drained and clarity disappears. These patterns are not flaws, they are learned responses. At some point, they helped you make sense of the world, but what once protected you may now be limiting you. Growth requires updating the mental framework, not fighting yourself for having one. Rebuilding thinking patterns starts with slowing down interpretation. Between an event and a reaction, there is a moment where meaning is assigned. Most people rush through that moment unconsciously. They assume the first meaning that appears is correct, but that first meaning is usually conditioned, not accurate. The skill you are developing here is cognitive distance, the ability to step back and observe your thoughts instead of merging with them. When you create that distance, you regain choice. You can ask better questions instead of accepting automatic conclusions. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" ask, "What am I assuming right now?" Instead of saying, "I can't handle this," ask, "What part of this feels threatening and why?" These questions don't deny reality. They clarify it. They move you from emotional reaction into conscious evaluation. And conscious evaluation is where control begins. Rebuilding thinking patterns is not about becoming endlessly positive. It's about becoming precise. Precision removes emotional exaggeration. It grounds your perception in reality instead of fear or hope. When perception is grounded, decisions improve. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is separating facts from narratives. Facts are observable. They are simple. Narratives are layered with meaning, assumption, and judgment. Most suffering comes not from facts, but from the stories built around them. For example, the fact may be you missed a day. The narrative may be you're inconsistent, you'll never change, and this proves you're unreliable. That narrative feels real, but it's not factual. It's a pattern repeating itself. When you begin to challenge narratives, resistance appears. The mind doesn't like uncertainty. It prefers familiar explanations, even painful ones. Letting go of old narratives feels like losing control, when in reality, it's gaining flexibility. This process requires patience. You are retraining decades of mental habits. You're not trying to eliminate negative thoughts. You're teaching yourself not to obey them automatically. That distinction matters. Over time, something important happens. Your internal dialogue becomes quieter, not because you're suppressing thoughts, but because fewer thoughts demand immediate reaction. The mind becomes a tool instead of a tyrant. As thinking patterns stabilize, emotional reactions soften. When interpretation changes, emotion follows. You don't need to control emotions directly when the thoughts feeding them are more accurate and balanced. This is why rebuilding thinking patterns supports emotional regulation naturally. Clarity also increases under pressure. Instead of spiraling, you analyze. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of personalizing, you contextualize. These shifts may feel subtle, but their impact compounds over time. Another key element is language. The words you use internally shape how your mind frames experience. Saying "I have to" creates resistance. Saying "I choose to" creates ownership. Saying "I always fail" locks identity. Saying "I'm learning" keeps identity flexible. Language does not change reality, but it changes orientation, and orientation determines behavior. When your internal language aligns with growth, consistency becomes easier. Not because effort disappears, but because friction decreases. Rebuilding thinking patterns also requires consistency. Insight alone is not enough. The mind learns through repetition. Each time you interrupt an old pattern and choose a clearer interpretation, you reinforce a new one. Over time, clarity becomes the default. This work is quiet. No one applauds it. There is no external reward, but internally, stability increases. Decisions feel cleaner. Self-trust grows. You stop exhausting yourself with unnecessary mental conflict. Eventually, you reach a point where challenges no longer feel personal. They feel practical. Problems become things to solve, not reflections of worth. That shift alone changes how you show up in every area of life. Rebuilding your thinking patterns does not mean you'll never struggle again. It means struggle no longer controls you. You remain steady even when things are uncertain. You think clearly even when emotions are present. This clarity feeds discipline. Discipline feeds consistency. Consistency feeds identity. And identity reshapes your life from the inside out. In the next chapter, you'll confront one of the hardest parts of transformation, letting go of the old version of yourself that no longer fits who you are becoming, even when that version feels familiar and safe. Chapter 6. Letting go of the old self. There is a moment in every real transformation when effort alone is no longer enough. You've built awareness, you've learned control, you've strengthened discipline and clarified your thinking. Yet something still pulls you backward. Not because you're doing things wrong, but because you're still carrying a version of yourself that no longer fits the direction you're moving. This is the part most people avoid. Letting go. Not letting go of goals or habits, but letting go of identity, the old explanations, the familiar patterns, the version of yourself that made sense once, even if it now holds you back. This is not an easy process because the old self feels known, predictable, safe. The old self gave you reasons for why things didn't work out, reasons for why you reacted the way you did, reasons for why you stayed where you were. Those reasons may no longer be true, but they are familiar, and familiarity has a powerful grip on the mind. Letting go feels like loss. Even when the identity you're releasing is limiting, it still feels like something is being taken away. You may feel uncertainty, grief, or resistance. You may even feel disloyal to who you've been. This is normal. Growth always includes a period of psychological shedding. The mind resists identity change more than behavior change. You can change what you do for a while, but changing who you believe you are threatens the internal story that has organized your life. That story explains your past. It gives meaning to your experiences, and without it, there is a temporary sense of groundlessness. This is where many people stop. They interpret discomfort as a sign that something is wrong. They retreat to the old self, not because it's better, but because it's familiar. They tell themselves they've changed enough or that now isn't the right time. In reality, they've reached the edge of real transformation and turned back. Letting go does not mean rejecting your past. It means recognizing that who you were is not who you must remain. The old self served a purpose. It helped you survive. It helped you cope. But survival is not the same as growth. What kept you safe once may keep you small now. There is also a hidden cost to holding on to the old self. You begin to negotiate with it. You compromise standards. You tolerate behaviors you know no longer align. Over time, this creates internal conflict. You feel divided, pulled between who you were and who you're becoming. That division drains energy and clarity. True alignment requires a decision. Not a dramatic declaration, but a quiet, internal commitment. A line you draw for yourself that says, I no longer identify with this pattern. That decision won't erase the old self immediately, but it changes how much authority it has. Letting go often reveals fear. Fear of responsibility, fear of visibility, fear of losing excuses. When you release the old identity, you can no longer blame it for your choices. You become accountable and accountability can feel heavier than limitation. But accountability is also freedom. It returns agency to you. It means your future is no longer determined by outdated narratives. You are no longer waiting for permission to change. You are choosing to. This stage requires patience. There will be moments when the old self resurfaces. Old reactions, old thoughts, old urges. This doesn't mean you've failed. It means the pattern is weakening, not gone. Identity shifts through repetition, not suppression. The key is how you respond when the old self appears. Do you shame yourself? Do you overcorrect? Or do you acknowledge it and choose differently? Each time you choose differently, you loosen the grip of the past. You don't need to fight the old self. You need to stop feeding it. Attention is fuel. Reaction is reinforcement. Calm acknowledgement followed by aligned action is what allows the old identity to fade. Letting go also changes relationships. Some people will respond positively to your growth. Others will resist it. Not because they want you to fail, but because your change disrupts the roles they're used to. You may feel pressure to shrink back to maintain comfort. This is another test of identity. Growth often requires emotional boundaries. You don't need to explain your evolution to everyone. You don't need validation for your choices. Quiet consistency communicates more than justification ever could. Over time, your behavior becomes the explanation. There is a subtle confidence that emerges when you let go of the old self. Not arrogance, not certainty, but steadiness. You stop performing growth and start embodying it. You no longer need to announce change. You live it. This process also clarifies values. As the old identity loosens, you begin to see what actually matters to you, not what you inherited or absorbed. Decisions feel cleaner. Trade-offs feel intentional. You're no longer trying to be everything to everyone. Letting go does not mean the past disappears. It means it stops defining you. You carry the lessons without carrying the limitations. You remember without reliving. You honor without repeating. At some point, the new self feels less like effort and more like home. That moment doesn't arrive suddenly. It arrives quietly. One day you notice you're no longer negotiating with yourself in the same way. The internal friction is lower. Alignment feels natural. This is when consistency becomes easier. Not because life is easier, but because you're no longer divided. The energy once spent resisting change is now available for building. Momentum replaces hesitation. Letting go is not a one-time event. It happens in layers. Each layer brings more clarity, more stability, more ownership. And with each layer released, the future opens slightly wider. The old self will always exist as a reference point. But it no longer gets to be the decision maker. You're not erasing who you were. You are completing the transition to who you are becoming. In the next chapter, you'll learn how to maintain this new identity through consistency. Not through motivation or pressure, but through systems and standards that hold even when energy is low and no one is watching. Chapter 7. Becoming consistent without motivation. Most people wait for motivation before they act. They wait to feel ready, inspired, energized, or confident. And when those feelings don't show up, they assume something is wrong. But motivation was never meant to be reliable. It's emotional. It fluctuates. It responds to comfort, not commitment. If your consistency depends on how you feel, it will always break under pressure. Consistency is not an emotional state. It's a standard. And standards don't change based on mood. The most consistent people are not the most motivated. They are the most decided. They've already answered the question of whether they will show up. So they don't waste energy debating it every day. Motivation is reactive. It shows up after progress, not before it. You feel motivated when things are going well, when results are visible, when effort feels rewarding. But transformation requires showing up long before those rewards appear. That's why relying on motivation keeps people trapped in cycles of starting and stopping. Consistency begins with removing negotiation. Every time you ask yourself whether you should act, you create friction. That friction drains willpower. Over time, it builds resistance. Consistent people reduce decisions. They don't ask, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "Is this part of my standard?" Standards are quiet agreements you make with yourself. They define what you do regardless of circumstance. They don't require intensity, they require clarity. When standards are clear, behavior becomes predictable, and predictability is what creates momentum. One of the biggest obstacles to consistency is perfectionism. People believe that if they can't do something fully, they shouldn't do it at all. So they wait for the perfect time, the perfect energy, the perfect conditions. Those conditions rarely arrive. Progress stalls not because effort is impossible, but because expectations are unrealistic. Consistency favors small, repeatable actions, not impressive ones, not extreme ones. Actions that you can sustain even on your worst days. The goal is not to do more. The goal is to do enough, consistently, to reinforce identity. This is where identity-based consistency matters. When you act consistently, you're not just completing tasks, you're reinforcing who you are. Each repetition is a signal to your mind. This is normal for me now. Over time, what once felt forced becomes familiar. Familiar becomes automatic. Consistency also requires emotional neutrality. You don't celebrate showing up, and you don't dramatize resistance. You simply do what you said you would do. This removes emotional spikes that make behavior unstable. Calm execution outperforms emotional intensity every time. There will be days when consistency feels heavy, not because something is wrong, but because growth demands effort without immediate reward. Those days matter most. They are where identity is solidified. Anyone can show up when it's easy. Few show up when it's boring, uncomfortable, or unrewarding. Consistency is built in private, when no one is watching, when there is no recognition, when the outcome feels distant. This is why it's so powerful. It creates internal trust. You begin to rely on yourself, not your emotions. One of the most effective ways to maintain consistency is lowering the activation threshold. Make the starting point easy. Remove friction. Prepare in advance. When effort is required just to begin, resistance increases. When starting is simple, momentum carries you forward. Another key is separating identity from outcome. You don't stop being consistent because results are slow. Consistency is not a strategy for immediate success. It's a commitment to alignment. Results follow alignment, not the other way around. Many people abandon consistency because they confuse discomfort with failure. Discomfort is not evidence that you should stop. It's evidence that you're stretching beyond old limits. The ability to tolerate discomfort without escaping it is what separates consistency from intensity. Consistency also requires forgiveness without excuses. You will miss days. You will slip. The difference between consistent people and inconsistent ones is not perfection, it's recovery speed. They return without drama, without self-criticism, without turning a lapse into an identity crisis. The moment you attach moral weight to inconsistency, you lose momentum. Shame does not produce consistency, it produces avoidance. Self-respect produces consistency because it keeps you aligned instead of reactive. Another overlooked factor is rhythm. Consistency doesn't mean doing everything every day. It means maintaining a rhythm you can sustain long-term. Some actions are daily, some are weekly, some are seasonal. Understanding this prevents burnout and keeps effort aligned with reality. Consistency compounds quietly. Each day may not feel significant, but over time, the accumulation becomes undeniable. Confidence grows. Stability increases. The internal dialogue shifts from doubt to trust. You stop questioning whether you can follow through. You know you can. This trust changes how you approach challenges. You don't panic when motivation dips. You don't overreact to setbacks. You rely on your standards instead of your feelings. That reliability becomes one of your greatest strengths. Becoming consistent without motivation also changes how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who tries. You begin identifying as someone who does. That shift is subtle, but it transforms behavior across every area of life. Consistency is not about pushing harder. It's about showing up even when pushing feels unnecessary. It's about honoring commitments that no one enforces but you. That quiet integrity becomes the backbone of self-mastery. Over time, motivation begins to return, but now it's different. It's not fragile. It's not required. It's a byproduct of progress, not a prerequisite. You don't chase it. It follows you. Consistency builds a life that feels stable instead of chaotic, predictable instead of reactive, grounded instead of emotional. That stability frees mental energy. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're working with yourself. This is how identity becomes unshakable. Not through inspiration, but through repetition. Not through intensity, but through reliability. In the final chapter, you'll see how all of these elements come together: identity, emotional control, discipline, thinking patterns, and consistency, to create a life that is lived from the inside out, with clarity, calm, and quiet confidence. Chapter 8. Living from the inside out. At some point, transformation stops feeling like work. Not because life becomes easy, but because your inner structure becomes stable. You no longer wake up negotiating with yourself. You no longer feel pulled in 10 different directions. There is a quiet alignment between who you are, how you think, and how you act. This is what it means to live from the inside out. Living from the inside out does not mean life is free of challenges. It means challenges no longer control you. External pressure still exists. Uncertainty still appears. But your responses come from clarity instead of impulse, from standards instead of emotion, from identity instead of fear. When you live this way, decisions feel cleaner. You don't overthink every option. You don't need constant reassurance. You know what aligns with your values and what doesn't. Saying no becomes easier. Saying yes becomes intentional. Your energy stops leaking into things that don't matter. This is the result of everything you've built so far. Awareness of your identity, control over emotional reactions, discipline rooted in self-respect, clear thinking patterns, the ability to let go of who you were, consistency without relying on motivation. These elements don't exist separately anymore. They work together. When the inside is stable, the outside adjusts naturally. You don't need to force confidence. It shows up in how you speak, how you move, and how you listen. You don't need to chase respect. It emerges from a calm presence. You don't need to control situations. You influence them by staying grounded. Most people spend their lives trying to manage outcomes. They try to control how others see them, how situations unfold, how quickly results arrive. Living from the inside out reverses that approach. You focus on what you can govern: your thoughts, your reactions, your standards, your effort. Outcomes become secondary. This shift brings relief. You stop carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You stop blaming circumstances for your internal state. You accept responsibility without burden. You understand that while you can't control everything, you can always control how you show up. There is a quiet confidence that comes with this way of living. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't disappear under pressure. It's built on trust. Trust that you will respond with integrity even when things don't go as planned. Living from the inside out also changes your relationship with time. You stop rushing, you stop panicking about where you should be. You focus on the present with intention. Progress becomes something you build daily, not something you chase desperately. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. You act when action is required. You wait when waiting is wise. You don't confuse motion with progress. You don't confuse urgency with importance. One of the most important outcomes of inner alignment is emotional stability. Not numbness, but steadiness. Emotions still arise, but they don't hijack your behavior. You feel without being consumed. You care without becoming reactive. This stability becomes your anchor in chaotic moments. When life tests you, and it will, your response reveals how far you've come. Old versions of you may have panicked, avoided, or reacted impulsively. Now, you pause. You assess. You choose. That pause is not hesitation, it is controlled. Living from the inside out also simplifies relationships. You stop seeking approval. You stop over-explaining. You stop bending yourself to fit expectations that don't align. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. Clear boundaries create healthier connections. You begin to attract different dynamics. People respond to consistency. They are calm. They respect those who don't need to dominate or perform. Influence becomes a byproduct of presence, not effort. Another change is how you experience success. Success no longer defines you. It reflects you. You don't inflate with wins or collapse with losses. You remain grounded. That grounding allows you to sustain growth without burning out. Failure also changes meaning. It becomes feedback, not identity. You adjust without self-judgment. You correct the course without drama. You don't need to protect your ego because your self-worth is no longer fragile. Living from the inside out requires maintenance, not constant self-improvement, but regular self-check-in. Alignment is not a destination, it's a practice. There will be moments when you drift. The difference now is that you notice sooner and return faster. You no longer abandon yourself when things get uncomfortable. You don't escape into distraction. You don't numb discomfort with avoidance. You stay present. Presence strengthens everything. This way of living also reshapes ambition. You still want to grow. You still want to build. But ambition is no longer driven by insecurity. It's driven by purpose. You pursue goals because they align with who you are, not because you're trying to prove something. The outside world will continue to change. Trends will shift. Circumstances will fluctuate. People will come and go. When your foundation is internal, these changes don't destabilize you. You adapt without losing yourself. This is the quiet advantage of inner mastery. It doesn't make you invincible. It makes you resilient. It doesn't remove obstacles. It removes unnecessary suffering. Living from the inside out is not about control over others. It's about control over your inner world. And when that world is clear, disciplined, and aligned, your outer world reflects it naturally. You no longer ask, "Who am I supposed to be?" You ask, "How do I live in alignment with who I already am becoming?" That question guides daily choices. Small actions, small decisions, small standards upheld consistently. Over time, those small choices create a life that feels intentional instead of reactive. This is what true transformation looks like. Not dramatic, not loud, not performative, steady, grounded, self-directed. You don't need to reinvent your life every year. You only need to maintain alignment between your inner world and your actions. When you do, life becomes clearer, calmer, stronger, and most importantly, it becomes yours. The quiet power of becoming. If there is one truth to take with you from this audiobook, it is this. Real transformation is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't require a dramatic moment, a perfect plan, or a sudden surge of motivation. It begins quietly, in the way you think, the way you respond, and the standards you choose to live by when no one is watching. You don't reinvent yourself by forcing a new life into place. You reinvent yourself by rebuilding the inner structure that shapes every decision you make. When your identity becomes clear, when your emotions are regulated, when your discipline is rooted in self-respect, and when your thinking is grounded in reality, your life begins to reorganize naturally. Nothing you've learned here requires perfection. You will still have difficult days. You will still feel doubt, fatigue, and resistance. The difference now is that those moments no longer define you. They no longer control your direction. You know how to pause instead of react. You know how to choose alignment over impulse. You know how to return to your standards without drama or self-judgment. Transformation is not about becoming someone extraordinary. It's about becoming consistent with who you already know you need to be. It's about closing the gap between intention and action, between values and behavior, between the life you imagine and the way you actually live. As you move forward, remember this: clarity comes before confidence. Confidence is not something you wait for. It's something you build by keeping small promises to yourself, especially when it would be easier not to. Every time you choose alignment, you strengthen trust. And trust is what creates stability. You don't need to control the world to live well. You only need to control what's inside your reach: your thoughts, your reactions, your effort, and your standards. When those are steady, external chaos loses its power over you. Life becomes less about survival and more about direction. There will be moments when you question whether this quiet work is worth it, when progress feels slow, when no one notices, when results aren't immediate. Those moments are not signs to stop. They are signs that the work is happening at the deepest level. This is where real change takes root. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are not running out of time. You're in the process of becoming more aligned, more grounded, and more intentional. That process doesn't rush. It builds. And the person you are becoming will be able to handle challenges the old version of you could not. Let this be a commitment, not a conclusion. A commitment to live from the inside out, to respond instead of react, to act from identity instead of emotion, to choose consistency over intensity, and to return to your standards even when you drift. You don't need a new life to move forward. You need a clearer inner foundation. And if this audiobook helped you see yourself more clearly or reminded you of who you're capable of becoming, consider sharing it with someone you care about, someone who feels stuck, overwhelmed, or quietly searching for direction. Sometimes the most meaningful way to help someone improve their life is simply offering them the perspective they didn't know they needed. Your transformation doesn't end here. It begins with what you choose next.